to the Paul McGUIRE report. This is Paul McGUIRE. All across the United States and across the world, we are seeing all kinds of weird, some people are calling them UFOs, some people are calling them alien spacecraft, some people are calling them futuristic technologies, but they're circling around, for example, the White House in Washington, D.C., and other government structures of power. So the question is, what are these things? Personally, I'm inclined to believe that they are uh, drones of various kinds. Number one is the increase in drone sales over the last number of years has skyrocketed. Number two is we're approaching the Christmas holidays where a lot of people are getting gifts, buying gifts, giving gifts. And of course, the percentage of drones given as a gift is on the increase. So this is a time when there's been a mass accumulation of drones. This is a time where we're approaching Christmas and a lot of people are getting drone gifts. So just on that basis alone, you could easily speculate that all of this drone activity could be nothing more than people flying their own private drones up in the air. I mean, here in Los Angeles, there have been many times that I have looked out uh, from place which I live down on the valley, and I've seen drones flying relatively near where I live. I mean, they're not that far out from the physical structure that I live in, and so my assumption is that either the drones are being driven by law enforcement to look at potential terrorist activities, potential lighting of forest fires, because we're in one of those many hubs in California, which is constantly being attacked by people lighting massive forest fires. And there's no way police or law enforcement can travel across the ground in various vehicles and cover the vast number of acres in search of people trying to start major fires. So by flying drones up above places that strategically would be a good place for some deviant to start a major fire, law enforcement has in its possession a certain amount of drones. So seeing drones is not like particularly usual for me to see them all the time. And then with these drones flying around government buildings, there are so many and certain areas in the United States, there are so many possibilities that could explain the existence of drones. So, for example, it could be a diversionary government psyop. Now, that may sound paranoid. Maybe that's all it is. It's paranoia. But it could also be a realistic depiction of what's actually going on. So it could be some kind of psyop. It could be some kind of military diversion. I doubt seriously if the drones up in the air that people are looking at around Washington, D.C. and other areas, I doubt seriously that they have been sent from, as some people announced in our government, which is to me a ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous statement, suggesting that the drones could have been released upon America and American military bases in America, American centers of power like the White House, that these drones were released by some kind of Iranian mothership flying over different areas, and the Iranian mothership is releasing drones. I mean, that of all the theories I've heard, that's probably the most preposterous theory in the entire group of theories. Now, the only way it would make sense is if there was a gang of amateurs running a psyops operation, a psychological warfare operation on the public. And if they were trying to drum up a war or set the stage for another Middle Eastern invasion uh, of Iran or other nations through simulating some kind of drone attack in which you could blame the Iranian mothership or some other nation hostile to the United States of America. You could blame them for the drone attack. But that's a very weird and bizarre theory because the name of the game would be an attempt, a very ill-conceived attempt, an attempt to stir up anger among the American people, especially if in conjunction with the release of all these drones, especially if these drones were to carry uh, biological warfare materials and disperse the biological warfare materials um, into the atmosphere over U.S. cities and Washington, D.C. and other places. And then if you can prove or you can assert that Iran or some other nation has deliberately flown drones into strategically key places in the United States for the purpose of dispersing some kind of uh, aerosolized weather modification weapon, a new kind of pandemic or plague. I mean, one person allegedly accused Bill Gates of meeting with the Iranians and other nations in preparation, they say, I don't really buy it, but in preparation, they say, of a mysterious, unannounced drone attack on the United States of America, January, in January of 2025, some kind of surprise attack against the United States of America regarding drones. And then there's the theory that never goes away, but it's an ever-present theory, and that's the theory that these drones are really being sent by, or these drones are really um, alien extraterrestrial UFOs, and they keep changing the name of the UFO. In terms of a PSYOP or psychological operations, it's very interesting to trace the recorded history of psychological operations or PSYOPs, in which the ever present theme of America and the world being attacked by UFOs and aliens from another planet. And this is not a recent development. This development first was conceived in the 1940s, the 1950s, especially with the writing of books like uh, War of the Worlds by the science fiction author H.G. Wells, who was also the head of British intelligence. And he personally trained the author of Brave New World, Aldous Huxley, and he trained Aldous Huxley's brother, the first transhumanist, um, Julian Huxley. He trained the Huxley brothers in uh, being directors of intelligence for the British government in the area of psyops or psychological operation. So the key, the Nazis and the Nazi scientists and the Nazi mind control experts, they had been playing allegedly this game of psyops for many, many decades, going back to the 1920s. Numerous British secret societies, like the Thule Society, like the Vril Society, and other societies, numerous British occultic secret societies um, developed all these published theories about the beautiful Vril maidens who were clairvoyants, had the ability to see in the future, had advanced scientific knowledge, and they were part of the Vril Society and the Thule Society. and they talked a lot about planet Earth being invaded by an advanced alien race. And they plan to take over the world with this advanced alien race. Now, I've been writing about this subject for a number of decades. I was interested in it as a young boy reading science fiction books, but I became even more interested in it when I read The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells and Invaders from Mars by H.G. Wells. Now, H.G. Wells wrote a whole bunch of books on uh, using the military and PSYOP to establish a global new world order. But H.G. Wells also wrote these nonfiction books where he detailed a master plan for building a new world order. And one of the components of this master plan of building a new world order was that aliens could be used as a PSYOP or a psychological warfare operation. And people all over America, all over the world, would be watching alien spacecraft piloted by uh, giant creatures and beings from Mars, invaders from Mars, in what became, in the movies with Tom Cruise, War of the Worlds, but also it became a popular mythology and popular usage of psychological warfare or psyops, in which they used the radio technology to broadcast a live many-hour drama where actors like Orson Welles, like actors would uh, appear on the radio drama, and they would describe a blow-by-blow attack on the United States of America by these giant UFO devices. And these UFO devices would be wiping out and slaughtering millions and millions of people across America. And the American people forgot to notice the disclaimer in this propaganda radio drama. They forgot to notice the disclaimer, which declared that this was purely a fictional radio play, a radio drama. It wasn't meant to be perceived as a real event. But I believe when you read the history of this whole thing, that the people who put it together knew that the American people would believe in this invaders from Mars scenario, and they would believe it was a real event. And I investigated all that. I researched all that many years ago. And I'll read you a couple of things from one of my books where I expose the secret plan behind propaganda, mass propaganda experimentation, the Princeton Radio Propaganda Project, which was a viable project in the implementation of technological propaganda and how it would affect the American people. And they rolled out that propaganda war on the American people with a radio drama that consisted of a fictitious radio drama invasion by uh, a race of aliens that came from Mars to invade the Earth. So we're going to check all this stuff out in just a moment. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. Remember, invaders from Mars and the other radio propaganda experiments had also eventually included major feature films with major stars, and contrast this with this proliferation of drones that some people want the American people to believe that all these drones represent collectively some kind of alien invasion. Well, you really think that's what this is about? Is it an alien invasion? Or is it propaganda? Is it a mind war? I'm inclined to think, after decades of studying this subject and reading about it, I'm inclined to think that It represents a mind war or a propaganda war. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us. We'll be back in just a moment. Once again, you're listening to the Paul McGuire Report, and we're looking into all these alleged drones circling around the White House, other government institutions, different states in America, and different places around the world. And some people think it's evidence of some kind of alien surveillance and that the drones are like UFOs or whatever. You know my opinion. I gave it to you a few minutes ago. But I wanna take a little trip, no pun intended. I want to take a little trip into UFOs, the occult, the history of the world, the history of the United States, the Illuminati, and all these areas in which they're constantly talking about uh, the potential reality of entities or beings from another planet that are on their way to dominate or take control of the United States of America. And really, this entire subject matter is relatively deep. I mean, we're not going to bore you at all. I promise you, you will not be bored. But we're going to show you the truth regarding some of the supernatural and potentially ET or extraterrestrial or potential interdimensional IT, interdimensional allegations of entities from a different dimension or a different world visiting planet Earth. And this is a central theme, by the way, in the Word of God in the Bible. Okay, so this is not like something new. Now we're gonna do a high speed examination of all of this because it has to do with, well, let's just talk about a few of the things that it has to deal with, such as the Book of Enoch, an extra book of the Bible, and the Nazi rocket scientists, the Nazi genetic scientists, the Nazi weapons of mass destruction scientists, and the scientific elite that rules the world but hides itself in plain sight. So let's check this out. Now, what's very interesting, I think is very interesting anyway, is that in approximately 1917, there was an educator and a globalist activist, John Dewey, who founded the American educational system. And he had returned from spending like a year or so in communist Russia, or what would soon become communist Russia. And he made an off the wall comment. He said, if you wanted to create a new world order, or you wanted to create a one world order, then you would have to convince the people of planet Earth, that they were under an all out attack from aliens from another planet. And on the basis of fear of an alien invasion, uh, the, the people of planet Earth would be so terrified that they would readily give up all their rights and join together in a one world government. Okay, so President Ronald Reagan, obviously a conservative president, uh, he began planting the seed publicly of a potential alien invasion of the United States and the possibility of an alien threat. So I'm reading from my book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, Volume 1. There's also A Prophecy of the Future of America, Volume 2, and you need to read it. Absolutely, you need to read it. You can get it at a discount at paulmcguire.us. So in this chapter entitled President Ronald Reagan Planting the Seed of an Alien Threat, I write, the transhumanist plan of the ancient occult societies and the hidden secrets of the Nephilim are part of a master plan. President Ronald Reagan, an honorary 33-degree Mason, often talked about how the whole world would become united if there was an external alien threat to our nation. So at the United Nations General Assembly on September 21st, 1987, Reagan said before the UN, quote, "In our obsession with the antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all of the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside of this world. We have a collective belief in an ET/UFO invasion that has been programmed into the consciousness of the world through media, television, film, radio, all kinds of things. Movies like The Battle for Los Angeles, Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Ridley Scott's Prometheus, uh, Spielberg's E.T., Taken, Alien, 1 to 4, Independence Day, 2001, Space Odyssey, Star Wars, Star Trek, the Men in Black series, From the Earth to the Moon, Apollo 13, War of the Worlds, Invasion, and countless other films depict an alien threat. Now, there was a guy, he was one of the most powerful Freemasons in the world. And I just read to you from my book, and I'm reading also from my book, Prophecy of the Future of America, where I have a chapter entitled Albert Pike and the Illuminati Plan for a Third World War. And I want you to think about what Pike, this super Freemasonic leader, said to the world and predicted, and then contrast and compare it with what you hear being said today. And you're going to see a remarkable similarity. One of the purposes of Pike and the Illuminati is to ignite a World War III, which would cause the mass slaughter of Christians, Muslims, Jews, and humanists alike. Albert Pike wrote, quote, "The multitudes disillusioned with Christianity, whose spirits will be from that moment without direction and leadership and anxious for an ideal but without knowledge where to send its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer brought finally out into the public view." So Pike, a huge Freemason, the most powerful Freemasonic leader in the entire world at the time, a former Confederate general, is talking about a future time in which there will be a horrible World War III that will cause endless multitudes of disillusioned Christians to doubt and to reject their faith. And instead, they will accept the pure doctrine of Lucifer that is finally brought out to public view. Now, what Pike is not telling you is that the hidden role that the Freemasons and the Illuminati and the other occult groups, they are going to play a critical, crucial role in igniting World War III. So when you look at the world stage today, what do you see? Well, you see a whole bunch of stuff that's tied to Bible prophecy and World War III. That's true. But you also see a lot of the stuff that Albert Pike wrote about when he predicted World War III. So you see a kind of occult prophecy regarding World War III, and you also see a kind of biblical revelation prophecy about World War III. In other words, I write in the book, in other words, it is the goal of the Illuminati to cause millions of Christians to be disillusioned and cause a falling away from the faith. That's happening now. The Apostle Paul discussed this in 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 4, where he talked about a great falling away from the faith, or the apostasia, the falling away from the true biblical faith, along with the great apostasy, which means the great falling away from so-called average Christians. There'll be a mass falling away by Christians from the true biblical faith in Jesus Christ. Now then, this will cause the acceleration and the coming of a one-world religion headed up by the false prophet and motivate people to reject Jesus Christ as Lord and pledge to worship the Antichrist so that they can receive the mark of the beast. But now we know the mark of the beast most likely will be in the technological form of a self-evolving nanochip implant that can be implanted in the human body through food, through mist, through water, through a vaccine, or any number of things. And it will self-evolve. It will have uh, artificial intelligence, and it will self-evolve. So the microchip implant most likely will be, in reality, a nanochip implant using nanotechnology. And it will be mandatory that if you want to participate in the world economic system, and if you want to be able to buy and sell in the world economic system, then you're going to have to receive the nanochip implant in order to get into the world economic system. So, what does this mean? This means that this big brother technology and conglomeration of biological technology, computer technology, wireless technology, EMF, and all kinds of stuff can be embedded in the human body and cause people to be taken over by artificial intelligence. It will force people's minds to be connected to the world brain, kind of like a computerized umbilical cord. And people will only be able to buy and sell to the degree that they receive this nanochip implant. So this is coming up on the horizon. Not only that, it's not just coming up on the horizon, it has already emerged. There are Scandinavian nations, there are militaries in the world where it is mandatory for the citizenry to receive an embedded nanochip implant. Now, how do you wake people up to this? How do you reach people who no longer read the Bible? Millions of Christians no longer read the Bible. Billions of people on planet Earth don't read the Bible. So how will you alert them? How will you educate them? How will you inform them about what's coming on planet Earth, especially in terms of the Great Reset, which is the new brand name for what was formerly called the New World Order, which is a one world government, a one world economic system, and a one world religion. This system, this globalist system, first began in ancient Babylon at the time of the Tower of Babel. And it continues to this day in our global culture. So, all this electronic equipment, if you really want to know what the real reason for all these electronic toys are, like cell phones and laptops and blah, 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 the real secret to all of this is that the main purpose of all of this technology is for the purpose of mass surveillance. And you are not, you think you're doing the searching, etc. No, you're not doing the searching. You're the object of the searching. Files, digital files are kept on you, your likes, your dislikes. And that's where we are in terms of future technology. And then when it comes to the global situation, we have the percolating, to use an old-fashioned expression. We have World War III percolating in the sense of Russia preparing to invade the Ukraine, NATO and the United States preparing to attack Russia if they invade the Ukraine. Then we have Israel versus Hamas, the Middle East, all these other nations are all in a very volatile and potentially explosive countdown, accelerated by modern technological weapons. And probably the most disturbing and frightening weapon of all has been the invention of DEW, directed energy weapons, which utilize the technology of Nikola Tesla. And these EMF weapons, these are the mysterious electromagnetic frequency weapons that vaporized Lahaina and Maui, that may very well be responsible for the raging hurricane-like fires for the second time in a row in Franklin, up in Franklin, in Malibu, California, not all that far from here. It appears to be more than fire. It's interesting that when you watch the television news here in Los Angeles, the local news channels that are covering the new Malibu fires, it's very conspicuous because they're not covering it like they did a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. Now, ever since the Paris, California fires and other fires, you notice that the news teams are conspicuously self-editing these fires. They're deliberately not showing you footage of the vaporized, disintegrated houses. They're not showing you footage of the disintegrated, vaporized cars that are just like dust. You'll see the cameramen and the camera women, and they will show you a long shot of a large house that is blazing and burning, or a long shot of some cars, etc. But they are meticulous in how they edit their shots so that they are deliberately not disclosing to you. They're deliberately not showing you what they used to show you before they started to censor their own video reporting. Now they hide from you the conspicuous video footage of vaporized cars, vaporized buildings, vaporized human bodies, and all the stuff that is so highly destructive that it looks like a nuclear weapon hit the place. They are hiding that footage. Now, why would they be hiding that? A lot of people are starting to get like hip to this. They're starting to become aware that the news footage that they're seeing on TV is highly manipulated. They're manipulating the video footage of the Lahaina fires, of the new Malibu fires. I was watching news just the other night, and there was a report on the fires in Malibu, and they were standing at an unusual distance from the burning building, the burning cars and people and all the stuff. They edited all that devastation out because they know that there's a huge percentage of people in the American public that are watching the news, but they're very, very keenly tuned into the level of devastation that like the new Malibu fires are bringing about. They're looking for, the public is looking for deliberately for the vaporized cars, the vaporized houses, and any evidence they can find of the weird stuff that was not censored in the past. And by weird stuff, I mean you'll have a whole bunch of houses that are totally vaporized, and then you'll have a house that is perfectly intact. Like nothing touched it at all. And then in a house later, it's vaporized, vaporized, vaporized. So if you're shooting a long shot of, let's say, 35 or 40 houses from a helicopter, and yet all you can see is stuff that looks like it was burned down from a normal fire, or cars that were burned from a normal fire, you're going to come away with a misinterpretation of what really happened because they're hiding from you the real truth about the real nature of directed energy beam weapons that were in previous news footage were vaporizing places like Paris, California, vaporizing the cars, vaporizing Lahaina, vaporizing Malibu, and on and on and on. So the question that should be asked, and it's not being answered to the American public, don't you think the American public deserves to know what the real truth is? I mean, for crying out loud, directed energy weapons started to be invented in 1941. They've been directed energy weapons have been around for a long, long time. There's actual patents on the directed energy weapon. And so we have, it's highly likely that something like 10 different hurricanes that made up Hurricane Helene on the Pacific coast of Florida, that the velocity and the intensity of Hurricane Helene came from directed energy weapons firing powerful electromagnetic frequency signals from, a satellite point of view. It's highly possible that many, and the whole Asheville, North Carolina situation, it appears that the level of devastation was so intense over Asheville, North Carolina, that people's bodies were vaporized. A massive amount of children have disappeared, both in Lahaina. A massive amount of children have disappeared in other places in the United States, like North Carolina, Asheville area. And yet we have these military style attacks using highly controversial uh, directed energy weapon type technology, which has apparently vaporized all these different locations. And the obvious question is, who is it that's firing directed energy weapons upon cities, towns, locations, the Pacific coast? Who is it? Who is it that's raining down on America an endless volley of directed energy weapons? Because this is not normal, and somebody needs to get to the bottom of it. Is it evil play to acquire pristine land that's highly valued? Is it a land grab? I mean, the UN wants different nations to uh, essentially steal all of the pristine, undamaged land across the United States and turn it into wilderness zones, specially protected by the UN. So is that what's happening here? Is it some kind of warning from a foreign power that has these technologies, and our government doesn't want to tell us because they don't want to freak us out and upset us? And most of all, they don't want to get blamed for their incompetency in allowing our nation to be attacked by directed energy weapons. So all of these things should be answered. And I'll tell you, I'll be very upfront with you. If you think that the American people are not functioning entirely in their right mind, if you think the American people are walking around in some kind of trance state or psychological warfare state of cognitive dissonance, well, all I can say to you that the behavior of the American people in all these areas are people who have just seen the devastation for themselves, either on the internet or on television. You would think that if your brain was operating properly, you would think that if your cognitive abilities, if your perception abilities were operating even remotely the way God designed them, that you would have a natural, innate inquisitiveness regarding all these directed energy weapon attacks. And you would demand, if you were sane, if you were rational, if your brain was fully functioning and not in some fog state, if your brain was fully rational, there would be an uprising in this nation of people demanding to know what's going on. Instead, you have people functioning like sheep or clones whose brains have been uh, impaired. Now, all one has to do is look at the obvious and ask questions. Yet, if you look at the obvious and ask questions in America today, welcome to being the odd man or the odd woman out. You are going to be looked upon with suspicion. You're going to be called names, either overtly or covertly. You are going to be disparaged, and you're going to be called a conspiracy theorist, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to be attacked. Why? Because it's human nature, especially in a society which is highly programmed like the United States of America. It's human nature to attack people who dare to think outside of the program box. So if you dare to think outside of the program box, if you dare to think independent, if you dare to think individually and use your critical mind and your ability to analyze and your ability to discern, your spiritual ability to discern, it would be the equivalent of being slapped hard in the face if you were like in a stupor or asleep. The shock from being slapped in the face should theoretically awaken you to the reality that there's something very, very off balance with our reality. And that would compel a sane person to investigate, to inquire. But we don't see that, even among Christians who go around uh, boasting that, they know the truth. The truth will set you free. You don't know the truth. If you can't tell me or tell anyone the fundamental basics about what's going on in our present reality, if you can't define for us why we have directed energy beam weapons being used against the American people, why we have what's called chemtrails. I mean, I talked to this guy. I won't go into how I talked to the guy, but I talked to this guy about the reality of chemtrails. And as we talked, he was very interested initially. But as I got into the proof of it, telling him how he could recognize a chemtrail from simply jet exhaust, I could see something that I've seen in the minds and consciousness of countless numbers of people. I could see that his mind began to spin. His mind was overloaded with too much truth. His mind did not have the capacity to analyze and assimilate the fact that directed energy weapons were not some far-fetched conspiracy theory, but that directed energy weapons were a valid uh, technology that has existed since the 1940s. But he couldn't handle it. And I have seen that talking to people, speaking around the country. It's not like I have some secret delight in talking about this subject, but I believe that unless you can break the spell of sorcery that the Book of Revelation talks about, the sorcery of Mystery Babylon, unless you can break that spell over people first, that most people are locked into some kind of perpetual hypnotic state where they are incapable of processing reality, analyzing reality, and understanding the nature of reality. They're just incapable of it. So when you talk to them in coherent, rational, scientific, and technological terms, you literally watch their brains overload right in front of your face. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people go into a state of consciousness known as cognitive dissonance. It's like the proverbial deer stuck in the headlights uh, reaction. If you've ever driven on a night road in the country and all of a sudden a deer shoots out and the deer freezes and you can see the deer's eyes reflecting from your headlights and then you got to slam on the brakes, the deer is paralyzed by the sound of the engine, the fact that this noise making machine is coming closer to it, and the deer is paralyzed in what is known as a deer in the headlights uh, state of consciousness. It's frozen. Well, God doesn't want his people to be like deer frozen in the headlights. He wants them to have the mind of Christ and be able to activate the mind of Christ by faith. So this is where we are in America right now. And this is why uh, spiritual battle is so fierce and intense when it comes to things like uh, the great spiritual war, the peaceful spiritual war for America. This is why it's such a difficult battle, because so many people are AWOL from the battle. They are disconnected from reality due to a kind of invisible programming that shuts their mind down. Okay, we're going to dig into this some more. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. Okay, you're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. Stand with us with your gifts, your prayers, your willingness to join uh, as a follower to whatever social media site you're listening to this program on or watching it on. Make sure you become an official follower of the Paul McGuire Report. That's vital. Okay, so there was a radio drama entitled Invaders from Mars. And it was an actual many years ago. America, episodic TV didn't exist, so people listened to radio drama or radio theater. So a British intellectual and science fiction writer and former head of British intelligence during World War I, he wrote the science fiction novel War of the Worlds in 1898. So in 1898, they were thinking about this sci-fi, high-tech, UFO stuff. They were thinking about it in 1898. So H.G. Wells wrote Invaders from Mars in 1898. And in 1938, his radio, not his radio, his novel, Invaders from Mars. In 1938, H.G. Wells' science fiction novel, War of the Worlds, was produced in 1938 as a on-air live narration. So it was narrated all across the world and from just about every radio station across the United States of America. It was narrated as if it were a real live news event, and it was narrated by the famous actor Orson Welles. Now, a very influential psychologist, Hadley Cantrell, conducted a scientific study of the effects of the Invaders from Mars radio broadcast and published his research in a book. The name of his book was, quote, The Invasion from Mars, a study in the psychology of panic. So in 1938, they are doing advanced scientific studies in the psychology of panic and using the technology of radio to spread mass panic in order to control the people. So this study explored the power of broadcast media, particularly as it relates to the suggestibility of human beings during the influence of fear. Fear is one of the most powerful psychological warfare weapons there is. Never forget what I just told you. Never forget what I just told you. It's perhaps one of the most powerful defensive truths you'll ever learn. And that is, fear is perhaps one of the greatest psychological weapons there is. And so humans can be programmed very easily when they're under a psychological state of fear. It was one of the first mass psychological operations or PSYOPs programs ever studied. Cantrell was affiliated with Princeton University's Radio Research Project, which was funded in 1937 by guess who? The Rockefeller Foundation. Also affiliated with the project was the Council on Foreign Relations, also Rockefeller, or the CFR, Member and Columbia Broadcasting System, CBS executive Frank Stanton, whose network had broadcast the program. Stanton would later go on to head the news division of CBS and in time would become president of the network, as well as chairman of the board of the RAND Corporation, a very powerful think tank, which has done groundbreaking research on, among other things, mass brainwashing. 2 years later, with Rockefeller Foundation money, Cantrell established the Office of Public Opinion Research, also at Princeton. Among the studies conducted by this public opinion research group was an analysis of the effectiveness of psycho-political operation, also known as propaganda. Propaganda of the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, which was the original name for the CIA, was the OSS. And so the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, it continued to evolve into the Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA. Then, during World War II, Cantrell and Rockefeller invested in the funding of the CFR member and CBS reporter Edward R. Murrow in setting up the Princeton Listening Center, which scientifically studied Nazi radio propaganda. with the goal of applying Nazi techniques to the OSS and eventually CIA propaganda. So you've got to understand, these people had it as their goal to dominate the minds and consciousness of Americans everywhere and people everywhere by broadcasting the same technology and techniques as Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. The Nazis broadcast their propaganda, and now CBS and Princeton University are using Nazi techniques. That's right, Nazi techniques upon the American people to control the American people, as they to this very day, this is going on, to control the American people through scientific mind control and scientific propaganda. And so that is happening in our world today. Now, one of another key Nazi type propaganda operation was known as Operation Paperclip, and Operation Paperclip, which was the U.S. government secretly snuck into the United States somewhere like 20,000 Nazi rocket scientists, Nazi genetic scientists, and Nazi PSYOPs scientists. On top of that, Dr. Werner von Braun was involved in these projects, and one of these other projects was a project known as Operation Bluebeam. Operation Bluebeam, in which the late Dr. Werner von Braun, the Nazi rocket scientist, warned of a conspiracy to create the fear of a massive alien invasion and the need to create space-based weapons program to protect planet Earth. The problem with this conspiracy theory is that most of the people who Werner von Braun warned believed in the potential threat of an alien invasion, including astronauts and military generals. Secondly, there appears to be no need to create the illusion of an alien invasion when many scientists believe that planet Earth has been visited many times by alien spacecraft, some of them hostile. So, Operation Bluebeam is a secret operation of mind control where you simulate an artificial UFO alien invasion of the United States and of the world. And so all the drones, which I believe are most probably drones, but it could be, there is the potential, and I'm saying it's just a potential, there is the potential that these so-called innocuous drones could actually be part of a forerunner of some kind of Operation Bluebeam project in which the American people are eventually brainwashed into believing that the drones have been sent by some kind of alien UFO race to scout out planet Earth for the purpose of a big time invasion. And what they have written down in their battle plans is that they intend to simulate some kind of artificial second coming of Jesus Christ to planet Earth, but it would be it would be an electronic counterfeit of the second coming. So you would see lights, you would see holograms, you would see 3D images dominating the skies, you would see voices, you would hear voices in your head from electromagnetic frequencies, and all of these things combined would simulate a counterfeit second coming of Jesus Christ to planet Earth along with the armies of heaven. But of course, it would be a masquerade ball. It wouldn't be the real second coming. It would be a masquerade ball designed to spiritually and psychologically deceive Americans into following, guess what? The Antichrist, who is the counterfeit of Jesus Christ. So we're going to talk about this and more in upcoming programs, but I wanted to give you a heads up of the technologies that are now available that can be used against Americans and people anywhere in the world to counterfeit a World War III, a nuke, to counterfeit an actual virtual second coming of Jesus Christ to planet Earth itself. So we need to step up our ability to perceive, analyze, and understand what's happening all around us. Visit paulmcguire.us, that's paulmcguire.us, and learn how to step up your game, increase your cognitive abilities, develop your intellectual enhancement, and be a threat to the principalities and powers and be a blessing to the children of God. This is Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us.